I'm not a big fan of the longer term fasting, certainly not 3 days. We must always remember that fasting can take a toll on the body. What you need to make sure is that your gut lining is healthy. Fasting helps because you get that break, so it can actually start repairing. Collagen is also really important. We need sugar. So sugar isn't something that we need to avoid completely. Our brain needs sugar. So what you need is to make sure you get a steady release of sugar. And there's 2 ways of doing that.
Hello, welcome back to The Health Review. Thank you for joining. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping. I first wanted to say that the Health Review newsletter is back. It comes out every Friday. If you'd love to hear more health news stories, guest articles from experts, little insights from me as well, I would love you to join me on there. So check out thehealthreview.com and you'll see a link to sign up to the newsletter. Would love to see you there. On today's episode, we are going to be doing a deep dive into nutrition, gut health, fasting. You know, we hear these words all the time, but do we really know how they actually connect? Something I'm very passionate about. I've been speaking a lot about gut health on this show after my own struggles, so can't wait to get into this episode today with May Simpkin, a UK nutritionist with a master's in personalised nutrition, and we're going to unpack the truth behind fasting for gut repair, how to balance your blood sugar naturally, and which foods can actually help heal the gut lining. That's something that I think all of us want to know. We keep hearing about leaky gut all the time, but do we really know what can help heal it? So let's get into it. Hi, May. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
It's lovely to see you today. You've mentioned, I've done lots of research into you. You have Egyptian heritage, which I'm sure came with lots of different ways of eating with family, lots of interesting foods. How would you say that sort of culture, having family who are Egyptian, how did that shape your approach to food, to cooking, to nutrition?
I think it really, really does have a big impact on my approach to food. So food is a big thing in Egyptian culture, in all Middle Eastern culture. I remember my mother, her waking thoughts were, what are we going to eat today? And so it was not an afterthought. It was something that was planned, and the whole day would be sort of, what are we going to eat? What are we going to prep? And I suppose I just took it for granted that we eat home-cooked food every single day. And it's only really when I left home and realized that actually that isn't normal, that sort of, we were lucky, but we didn't really realize how lucky we are. But I think now, the foundations were there. We've had good food, good health as a result of it. And so it's something that I realized was actually already in me. So I didn't have to sort of search for it. Can I cook? What do I want to cook? I realized I could cook simply by watching, because it was happening every single day in the house. So obviously I had to learn how to make things taste nice and, obviously sort of cooking skills. But in terms of, should I cook? Can I cook? I could definitely put something together. And I think that just continued to expand throughout my life as a young adult, after I had children, and obviously now in my career with nutrition. If I'm advising people to eat something and I start talking about, just roast some vegetables. And then I realized that people were saying, well, how do you roast vegetables? And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to start teaching people how to actually prepare the foods as well. But because it was in me and, it's just something I did, it felt like a natural progression throughout my career.
I absolutely love that. And I think it's so amazing that you had that kind of in you already, because I think for a lot of people who grew up in Western nations, unless their parents were quite into cooking, maybe chefs or maybe people who'd been taught by their parents, I think a lot of people grew up without that. And actually, when I grew up in the 90s, a lot of people had their dinners, takeaway, microwave, fast food meals on their lap watching TV.
Yeah.
That was common in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah.
And you don't have that education about each of the ingredients, and you don't really know how things are made. It's a bit of a mystery. Sometimes with the packaged foods, you have no idea how that was put together or even what's in it. And as we know now, there can be a lot of nasty things added into these fast foods, processed foods, obviously. So the fact that you had that already is something I love. That's something that I'm trying to incorporate into my life always now. And I think once you get the confidence and you learn how to cook, even just some basics, it can become so fun. And that's where I think a lot of people, they don't get there, but it's that, but it's also the time. So now I think a lot of us are all looking for, you know, ways to cook quickly, but nice meals. So we can get into maybe some of the things that you cook at home.
Yeah. I mean, I always say, if you can't cook, it's not the end of the world. I talk about food assembly. So you can just simply assemble healthy foods on your plate. Some of those could be ready-made if you're turning over the ingredients, you're looking at what's in them. So it's not that you have to cook everything from scratch, but, you can still assemble a healthy plate without many cooking skills. And then you can progress from there. So it's just the idea that you are in control of your food choices. And I think that's actually crucial. And we can lose sight of that because of time constraints, because of skill constraints, and maybe even cost comes into it. But I do genuinely believe we can get around all of that, and you can still eat well in a very reasonable way with all those constraints.
I absolutely agree with you. I love it. And now, I don't know about you, but it's one of my favorite times of the day is cooking. I try and allow like at least half an hour, maybe up to an hour if it's something more elaborate. And that's like almost like a relaxing time. Once you've got your staple recipes down, you don't have to always focus the whole time once you've got your recipes down. So I think it's something we can all enjoy. I've seen that you've mentioned that fad diets were a big thing when you were younger. Is that something you fell into yourself? What was your experience of being in that culture?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of that culture, as I've already said, is food and eating. And therefore, I was overweight as a teenager, and I was very conscious of it. I don't think there was that same diet culture that there is now. However, it was still there. So, being big meant I couldn't wear certain things I wanted to, but nobody really sort of focused on it in the same way. But it was something I was very aware of. I did fall into that diet culture on a personal level. And it was really hard because the diet culture at the time was simply lettuce leaves with a low-calorie salad cream or something. There were no other options. There wasn't this concept of piling your plate with loads of vegetables, cutting back on certain food groups. It was diet food. And that's something that has really stuck with me. And it's something that I have now developed in my approach when I'm dealing with clients. And in everything that I promote. I don't like people to tell me that they are going on a diet. And I would certainly never put anyone on a diet, because a diet to me implies something that you start and you continue for a certain amount of time and then you finish. But then what happens once you've finished? Do you revert back to what you were eating? Do you go, are you okay eating lettuce leaves with low-calorie salad cream on? I mean, it's just not sustainable. So because of that sort of phase in my life, I had to find a way of eating well that was sustainable. Things developed, the culture changed, and it wasn't all about being that extreme and certain foods. We had a better understanding of how to lose weight while still eating normal food, so to speak. So that's what I evolved into.
That's good to hear, because it's frightening, I think, for young women. The pressure, the idea of starving yourself becomes almost normalized around certain, circles. Or I went to dance school, so I went to a very old-fashioned, strict dance school, and a lot of my peers were put on diets, and we were sort of 17, 18 years old, and they were basically starving themselves. So it's horrible to think of the damage. And I've been hearing recently lots of experts in bone health, in menopause, saying that actually your bone health peaks in your 20s,
Absolutely.
late 20s time.
Yeah.
And you should really be getting all of your nutrients plus your strength training in, because that peak is the strongest your bones will ever be. Yeah. And then after that, it will decline. So if they're not in a great place in your late 20s, they're not going to be in a great place. Maybe you could try and sustain it with some health things as you get older. But really, I think there needs to be more emphasis on really feeding ourselves properly when we're in our younger years.
Yeah, I don't think people realise that, and especially young girls, because, as a young girl, your focus is on so many other things. You're growing up, you've got social thoughts, career, studying. There's so much going on, and really food and your health, you feel invincible at that age. But your bone health, exactly as you said, actually peaks by your late 20s. So what I mean by that is that your bones will not lay down any more calcium after your late 20s. So you need to make sure that your diet is really good up until that point so that you can pack in as much calcium as you can. So you've got really great, compact, dense bone health, because then the rest of your life is about maintaining that bone density, maintaining the calcium levels. And the way that you maintain it is making sure that you eat well so that your body doesn't have to dip into the reserves, which is from your bones. So if you are not eating foods that are high in calcium from post late 20s onwards, your body is very clever. It's going to compensate for it, and it will compensate by leaching calcium out of your bones. So, every now and again, even short phases are fine. But if that's how your diet is and that's how your lifestyle is, you will end up leaching too much calcium, and you will end up with what we call sort of a spongy bone scenario. And that means you are susceptible to injury. You then, don't have the needs to back up when times are low because you're using those reserves. And, hopefully you're going to have a long, healthy, active life. And, you've got to prepare from those ages. So, any young girls out there listening, please, please, please prioritize your health. Eat foods that are high in calcium, which is, dark green vegetables. Sesame seeds are a great source. So tahini is really good. Pulses, lentils, legumes, that whole family. Obviously dairy as well, but it's surprising. I think people think dairy is the highest amount of calcium. Dark green vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes are equally, if not better, sources of calcium. So make sure you get enough of those in.
I love that tip. And from fad diets to something more sort of, I guess, healthy fasting, if done correctly. Fasting's everywhere now, intermittent fasting. There are people doing 3-day-long water fasts. What does the science actually say about fasting and gut health? Because we know it can help, but obviously it has to be done safely.
It does, yes. Now, I will say that I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting, but not necessarily any other forms of fasting. So intermittent fasting for me is what many people will know as the 16-8. So you eat your foods in a window of 8 hours and then you fast for 16 hours. And the good news is overnight counts. So, it may sound extreme, but if you're using an overnight, you can just simply delay maybe that first meal of the day until around lunchtime, and then you easily get that 16 to 18 hours of fasting. I'm not a big fan of the longer term fasting, certainly not 3 days. I feel as though we must always remember that fasting can take a toll on the body, and it then can become a stressor. So we don't really want to be doing anything that is going to add to the stress in your body. And, when we're talking about stress, it's not necessarily sort of blatant stress that we know about, an argument or, traffic jams or work commitments. It's internal stress where your body is out of balance. That's the type of stress that I'm referring to. So intermittent fasting is a really lovely way of keeping a little bit of control over your food intake. We're not designed to be eating all the time. And that's something that has evolved. And actually, because I think the messaging was wrong a few decades ago of that sort of 3 meals and 2 snacks, so you're sort of eating 5 times a day, that's actually too much. And when you do that, it can send your blood sugars soaring, and then crashing afterwards, depending on the choices. But basically, it's too much going on for the body. So we need to try and give the body a little bit of a break, a little bit of a rest, and that includes the gut. So by fasting, it's one way of limiting our food intake and making sure that your body and your gut get a break. When that break occurs, your body can just say, to itself, well, that's great. Thank you very much. I now don't need to deal with digestion. I can now start focusing on all the other systems in the body. And it has the resources to do that. because you've eaten good food, it's broken that food down efficiently, you've absorbed all the nutrients. Those nutrients that can then, get around to all the other symptoms in your body. So I'm talking sort of, making sure that your hormonal health is good, your psychological, your mental health, your energy creation, all the other systems in the body that also are equally important. But if your body is constantly focusing on digestion and breaking down foods, it's going to prioritize that. And everything else will happen just less efficiently. And, you will feel the effects for it. And those effects could be something like fatigue, brain fog, a little bit of, maybe mental health issues, where everything's just working all the time. And it doesn't need to be that way. So by having a bit of structure with intermittent fasting, you've got a natural way of giving your body a break so it can just get on and do everything else efficiently. And for me, it really works. But I will qualify that and say you must always, always, always listen to your body, look at your lifestyle, and make sure that fasting isn't becoming a stressor. So are you feeling well over it? Are you feeling energized? Do you feel that your brain is, less foggy? You are energized. You feel good for it. If you don't feel like that, if you feel jittery, a bit anxious, a bit low, you're constantly thinking about food because you're constantly hungry, that's not working for you. So I wouldn't say absolutely it works for everyone. You've got to look at your lifestyle. You've got to look at your health situation and make sure you're honest with yourself and make sure that you do actually feel good for it. And if it doesn't feel good initially, it could just be something you work towards. So, you might not do 16 hours. You might just do 12 hours, 8, 9 of which are sleeping hours. And you can just build up gradually. But listen to your body. It isn't necessarily for everyone. But if it is, it's something that I really advocate and I feel good for it on a personal level. I know many around me feel the same way.
Yeah. As you say, I guess it's creeping it in slowly. So you might just extend your window of not eating for an hour for a week and then try that and then maybe extend it another hour. So eventually you're working up to it. So it's not like this overnight thing where suddenly you're not having breakfast and it feels painful. And I read a book, Fast Like a Girl, and the author was explaining how actually for women who are having a cycle, that actually the first 2 weeks of their cycle can be more receptive to the fasting, sort of the hormones and everything. Whereas after ovulation, it can be a bit harder because cortisol levels are higher and it can be the stressor. So I guess, as you say, it's kind of working out. I quite like that idea of like working out, where am I in my cycle? Am I in my follicular like power phase where I'm just feeling more energetic and I can cope with fasting? Do I need to be a bit more careful, in the luteal phase where things are just need slowing down a bit? So I completely agree that you just want to listen to your body at all times. And I guess, do you think it's really important with fasting to make sure that when you are eating, it's nutrient dense food and it's not, because I have heard people say that you can basically eat what you want if you've done your fasting, because you'll still get some of those gut benefits. But we don't really want to be doing that, do we?
Absolutely not. I think whatever you're doing, even if you're not fasting, I really want to urge people to really factor in good choices at every opportunity. That does not mean that you will, never eat food choices that are, not great nutritionally, but it's really important to maximize the number of nutrients and the type of nutrients that you eat. If you eat well, you will feel well. It's actually as simple as that. And we all know that when we've had phases in our lives, so you're on holiday, it's a busy period at work, you're not really thinking it through, and you're just grabbing things that are sort of okay, but not amazing. You feel okay, but not amazing. Whereas, the times where you're really thinking things through, planning your meals, getting all the combinations of the food groups right, in the right balance, you do feel good. So in any case, whether you're fasting or not, it is important to eat nutrient-dense foods. It's more important with fasting because you're not relying on something you can grab outside of your fasting windows. So the one thing I will always say to people who want to start fasting is do not underestimate the importance of planning. And as boring and as tedious as that might sound, imagine the scenario, you finally sort of come through out of your fasting window. So it's probably around midday, lunchtime, you've had a busy morning and you are ravenous because your blood sugars are low and you are due to eat and you haven't planned. So there is nothing that you can eat. Your blood sugars are low and the messaging is going to be going up to your brain saying, eat, 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 but not just eat anything. It's going to be saying, eat sugar. And of course, you're going to grab something sweet that's going to, satisfy that sweet craving, but that isn't necessarily going to last that long. And it's also obviously not the best nutrition and nutritionally balanced choice. So try and plan, have things in the fridge. Leftovers are great, individual, things that you can just grab, some hummus, some vegetables, some eggs, some, maybe chicken breast, salmon fillet, anything that is ready cooked, ready to just literally going back to that food assembly, put on your plate, and then you are ready to eat good food. You eat good food, you get good nutrients, and you will feel good for it. So yes, very, very important to eat nutrient-dense food, but probably more important with fasting because your window is you've got less opportunities to make sure you get good nutrients in, so don't waste them.
Cram in the nutrients in that short window. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying today's episode, please do subscribe or give it a follow so we can keep giving you excellent content and bringing on amazing guests that hopefully you're loving on the Health Review podcast. Now back to the show. I'd like to ask you about leaky gut because we're hearing a lot about it. Hearing that fasting actually can be a good tool if you're trying to heal your gut. Is it the case that it can help close those little gaps in the gut lining if we do some fasting?
Yes, as I've already said, one of the benefits of fasting is that it gives your body a chance to repair. It can focus on other things other than digestion. And the one area where it can also repair is the gut lining and your digestive system. Now, leaky gut is a situation where the lining of your gut is lined with what we call finger-like projections. And those fingers, imagine, literally like the fingers on your hand, should be very tightly closed together. So you've got tight junctions in between those finger-like projections. And that's a healthy gut lining because then nothing can get through except the tiniest particles that are produced as a result of a healthy digestive process. So when you eat your food, it goes down into your stomach, enzymes are released, everything is broken down, and it goes through the whole digestive process from your stomach through to the small intestine. And then in that small intestine, nutrients will be absorbed and other nutrients will also be absorbed in the large intestine as it goes further through. Now, what you don't want are larger particles being absorbed. Now, what will happen there is that larger particles can either arise from incomplete digestion because it's not quite ready to be absorbed yet. But if the junctions between those finger-like projections are too wide, you will get larger particles going into your blood and they will cause havoc. So they will make you not feel good, and then your body has to work very hard to remove them because they then become toxins. They're not in the form that your body recognizes them. It can't just say, great, that's a broken down form of a nutrient, I can take it to wherever it's needed in the body. It will just say, I don't recognize that form, it's too big. I don't know where to break it down because it should have been broken down in the small intestine. I now have to find a way of eliminating that through the liver, through detoxification, through the kidneys, and obviously through the other end as well, sort of as you're passing everything through. So what you need to make sure is that your gut lining is healthy. And fasting helps because you get that break, so it can actually start repairing. Collagen is also really important. So collagen is a factor that will help with that lining. So yes, collagen supplements are great, but also things like bone broth are also a good way of taking in some collagen. And then that sort of thing that we hear so much about, and that's your gut bacteria, your microbiome. if your microbiome is healthy, that will help heal your gut, heal that gut lining, keep those finger-like projections tight, and then nothing will get through that is too big, and you will just take in the benefits from the foods that have been well digested because you've got a healthy digestive system and nothing is going through that's too big. So it's sort of win-win.
For people who are listening now who might have a little bit of a sensitive gut, perhaps they've got food intolerances, perhaps they think they might have IBS tendencies. How do you know you've got leaky gut? Is there a way of actually, do you presume you have it if you've got some of these symptoms, or is there any specific symptoms that would tell you probably have leaky gut?
Well, leaky gut can be, under the umbrella of IBS, an unhealthy digestive system. And the symptoms that you will feel will be things like, bloating, gas, reflux, diarrhea, constipation, sometimes fluctuating between the two. So you're eating food and you can feel that food being processed because nothing is happening efficiently. It's all happening, it's being broken down, but it's not happening efficiently. So one of the first things that you can do is just think to yourself, okay, first of all, is there a specific food? Now, very, very often, unless you have a specific allergy and you've been tested and you know you are allergic, and there is a difference here between an allergy and an intolerance, you are probably okay to eat that food. What I want people to think about is the environment the food arrives in, i.e. your digestive tract. Is that healthy? If a food arrives in a healthy digestive system, it will be able to process it well and you will not feel those uncomfortable symptoms of, bloating, gas, etc. The reason that you feel those symptoms is that the food will arrive in the digestive system and healthy digestion is not taking place. So it's taking much longer to process. The food sits there. It can ferment. It can cause gases that makes you feel uncomfortable, which obviously gives you bloating. And then you think, I'm intolerant to that food. But the problem I have with that is that you then might start eliminating that food and focusing too much on another food. And then that can also have a similar effect. And then you may start eliminating too many food groups. And before you know it, you're not getting a healthy, balanced diet. So the best thing to do is focus on enhancing your digestive system. So by healing the gut with specific nutrients, for example, collagen, but also really focusing on improving that microbiome. So getting good gut bacteria by eating foods that actually contain bacteria. And yogurt, live probiotic yogurt, is probably one of the simplest foods you can eat on a daily basis that will literally introduce good gut bacteria. But it's not enough just to introduce the bacteria. You have to actually keep those bacteria alive. They are live organisms, so they need feeding. And the way you feed them is with fiber. So this is why, as nutritionists, we're always talking about don't forget fiber, increase your fiber, whether that's soluble fiber like legumes and oats, or fiber that helps push everything through, which is, stalks and skins, and prebiotic foods like onions and garlic and asparagus and things like that are going to provide that array of fiber that good bacteria needs. You keep the good bacteria alive, they will proliferate, they will thrive, they will starve out the bad bacteria, and your gut health will improve significantly. And it's really important not to lose sight of that. And it's the sort of thing you have to do every meal, every day. Okay, so that's not to say you're never going to eat sugar again, but if you're eating a diet that's high in sugar and not enough of the live bacteria foods that contain live bacteria, or foods that contain fiber to feed the live bacteria, you're going to be eating too much sugar. And it's actually the bad bacteria that thrive on sugar. So the more sugar you eat, the more they will thrive, they will take over, and that's when you have the unhealthy digestive symptoms that are quite debilitating. It's quite hard to have all those symptoms and still eat well. So you've got to really be focused at the beginning to get the good food in, improve your digestive health, and then honestly, you'll be able to eat anything, but you've just got to be consistent with it and, don't lose sight of those food choices.
I love all of that. And I think if you are in that position right now, I've been in that position on and off at points in my life, and patience is really important, because it's easy to get stressed, and actually the stress makes it worse. So
Absolutely.
Nervous system, that's all coming in now as a more and more research as to being a big factor in gut health and keeping the gut stable. I was reading an article the other day, and it was a lady who passed away. I think she was 117 or something. And there's all sorts of research in the gut bacteria now with certain strains that are being found to potentially help with longevity. So some of these centenarians in blue zones, they've been testing their gut bacteria. And before she passed away, she did some stool samples for the research to find out, was there anything about her gut health that could be helping her live? And obviously, there are genetic things going on. There are other things, but they did find this sort of bifidobacteria strain very, very present in her gut. And obviously, this is not a full study. This was just one anecdote from one woman. But she said that she ate yogurt three times a day.
Yeah, exactly.
3 times a day.
Exactly.
So who knows if that was the one thing keeping her alive that
long. I really
feel
it is, because you are literally introducing those good strains of bacteria. But as I said, it's not enough just to introduce it. You've got to keep them alive. And I think that's where sometimes people don't quite understand the correlation of, eating good food, but maintaining it and being consistent with it and keeping them alive so they proliferate, they take over your digestive tract, and you have a healthy digestive system and digestive process. So you eat food, it's very efficiently broken down, it passes through all the different sections of your digestive system, passes out the other end, and you absorb all the nutrients. Your body says, thank you very much, I've got all the nutrients I need, I can make you work efficiently, and you're going to feel well for it. And it's sort of that simple, but the problem is it's consistency and patience. So if you're consistent, you keep doing the same thing, you will start to feel the benefits. And I don't even think it needs to be that long. I do really believe that if you can do that for a week, 10 days, I have people that come on my retreats where we do it for 4-5 days, and they feel the benefits immediately, because I am feeding them in the way that I'm speaking now, and they're actually doing it. They're not just talking about it, they are doing it. And they say to me they have got changes in their bowel movements, how they feel, they're energized. Obviously, it's not just down to food. There's exercise. There's all sorts of other things that, the stressors of life can also be a factor. So we try and eliminate that and, on the retreat experience. But really, it's down to food choices, and you are actually doing it. And then, my aim is for them just to continue, and because they feel good, and it's so much easier to do something if you feel good for it. So
we were talking before we started recording about your retreats. So you've actually been doing them for 10 years.
Yes.
And I was saying how retreats now are such a huge thing. They've really blown up in the last sort of 3 years in particular. But you have been doing it for a lot longer.
I was on it, yes.
You were already on it. I'm curious, what do your retreats look like?
Well, I think the reason I was on it is I already had the property. So we've owned a chateau in Gitz in France for nearly 25 years now. So again, we were sort of there, quite early on with that. And when I qualified as a nutritionist, I thought, I can actually combine the two. So one of the reasons I was able to get it off the ground a little bit more easily is I didn't have to hire anywhere. I already had the properties. I have to say the retreats have really evolved. We've built a program that I'm really proud of. I run it with a yoga instructor. This coming year, he's now qualified as a Pilates instructor, so we're actually going to be running it as Pilates. But the whole concept of my retreats is based on 5 pillars, where if you can embrace these 5 pillars throughout your life, I do firmly believe that you will feel good and life will be maybe easier to manage. And obviously food is one, nourishing your body, moving your body, rest and relaxation. So obviously being on a retreat experience, that's easier to do. You haven't got any of those pressures of day-to-day life. I also believe being part of a community and like-minded people is really crucial. So when I bring people meal, out to France. It's in the Loire Valley in rural France. You're with people who all want to be there. They all have the same aim. And it's really quite nourishing and nurturing from a mental health perspective. And the final pillar that I always try and discuss with people during the retreat is having some form of purpose in life. So, yes, you're working, yes, you're raising a family, and life can be busy, but try not to lose sight of, what is a purpose. And it doesn't have to be something big and major. It can just be a short-term purpose, but just fulfilling your own self-needs and not neglecting yourself. Honestly, I try and encompass all of that on the retreat experience, and it's very successful and very powerful, and I really love running them. So
amazing! I'm jealous. I want to run a retreat. It sounds so nice to be able to, especially if you're cooking, to be able to gift that experience to people.
We talk about nutrition all the time, but not in a workshop environment. Just generally chatting like you and I are doing now, because people will always say to me, "Oh, I've got this thing. What do you think about this?" Or "I read this." And it always sparks a conversation, and I don't curate it much because I like to just chat about it, and it needs to be relevant to people. But one thing I do also do is a cooking workshop every day, because it stemmed from when I didn't have help down there and actually needed to cook things that people were going to eat. I realized that people love that. They love to see how how everything they're eating is being made. And it's my approach is very simple. It's very uncomplicated. It's not, I'm not a professional chef. I'm just somebody who can cook and likes cooking. So I want to impart that on people and, empower them to think, I can do this. This wasn't that hard to make. And I think it works. People tell me that they continue cooking, and,
that's great.
So yeah.
I think that's the key, isn't it? Because I guess for some people, you can go and have these experiences or have a week off work and you're a bit more mindful about cooking. But it's when the daily life kicks in again, when you've got the kids to sort their meals out, might be different to yours, different times. You're coming back late from work. It's how do you stay, with those ideally home cooked foods, whole foods. Yeah. How do you keep that going when you've got such a lot going on? And that's the question. I guess a lot of people are using these healthier meal prep services now, which can be be a positive.
It can be. I mean, one of the things that, I also impart is, I've been there. I've got 3 children. I've brought them up. We've had all those same pressures. And I had to do all of that. And I learned a lot on the job, so to speak. I think one of the key things, well, actually, it goes back to the very first stage, which is actually shopping in the first place. Okay, I think people forget that is where you need to spend some time thinking. So try not to rush around the supermarket. Allow yourself time. I personally find it much easier not to plan my recipes, not to plan my meals in the same way, and just go and buy a whole array of vegetables, a whole array of protein foods, and anything else that takes my fancy. And I say to people, maybe buy things that are on special offer, buy something that's sort of new, buy the staples. If you always like chicken or always like fish, buy all of that. Do not neglect the freezer foods as well. Frozen foods are incredible, the ultimate convenience food, frankly. And then if you then are home and you come in and you're really pushed for time, if you open your fridge or your larder or your freezer, you have things that you can assemble in a healthy way, you've got far more chance of producing something, easy. So shopping is key. Don't worry too much about making everything amazing. If you can cook, you can create really lovely, complicated meals. If you can't, you're simply going to steam, boil, bake, and put them on a plate. Just as nutritious, so that's not an issue. And then another little tip I will say is do not throw leftovers away. This is like my biggest thing, and anyone that knows me won't be surprised to hear me saying that, because, one leftover portion of this with one leftover portion of that is suddenly a meal for two kids. One's got swimming practice, one's got football practice. They're eating at different times. You've actually got meals already in the fridge. So, just cling film it and do not throw it away. That is going to be one day you do not have to cook, and you can still feed people around you in a healthy way and feed yourself. That's your lunch the following day. So is a little bit of planning, but don't over plan, because if you're going to sit there and, if you're the type that likes to sit and menu plan and recipe plan, absolutely go ahead and do it. But if you're not, don't get hung up on it. Just go to the supermarket, buy great stuff, and think about how you can put them together, in the morning, for the evening, or even there and then as you open the fridge.
I love that. Blood sugar, glucose spikes. It's had a moment the last few years. We had the glucose goddess releasing her book. Lots of people have been investing in wearing their CGM continuous glucose monitors. Lots of people are into it. What would you say the best foods are to keep a stable blood sugar level throughout the day? So are there any types of meals that might help?
Yes. I mean, I talked earlier about your gut health being fundamental to overall health, and it is. And what is fundamental to achieving that is actually maintaining your blood sugars and making sure that they are balanced. Now, if you eat a food or a meal that is very high in sugar, and I'm really specifically talking about refined sugar. So we're talking, cakes, biscuits, sweets, chocolates, desserts, that sort of thing. So quick fixes, things that people feel. I talked earlier about blood sugars being really low and the messaging saying eat sugar. Those tend to be the things that people reach for. And what will happen is, it'll go down into your digestive system and your gut will say, well, that's great. Thank you. I don't need to do any breaking down here. The manufacturers have already refined it all. And all I need to do is just release all that sugar into the bloodstream. So you will have that food. It will be instantly released as sugar into your bloodstream and you will feel good for it. And you'll just think, oh my God, great. I needed that. That's exactly what I needed. But then what happens is your body says, well, I can't have, for want of another expression, thick, gloopy, sticky blood. So your pancreas will release insulin. Insulin is the hormone that removes sugar from your blood, and you will get a big surge of insulin. And as quickly as that sugar has surged into your bloodstream, it will also be removed as quickly. So you get that surge and then insulin is released and you immediately come crashing down. At that point, you could find yourself on the roller coaster, what we call the blood sugar roller coaster, because you feel low and then what do you reach for? Sugar, etc. We need to avoid that. So one of the ways that you can avoid it is by making sure that you don't surge in sugar. So the sugar is just released into your bloodstream slowly. Now, we need sugar. So sugar isn't something that we need to avoid completely. Our brain needs sugar, even if you're sitting down doing absolutely nothing, so no physical exertion. You need sugar for your body to function. So what you need is to make sure you get a steady release of sugar. And there's two ways of doing that. Making sure that you eat enough protein with your meal and fats. Proteins and fats are complex nutrients. They take longer for your digestive system to break down. So if the meal already has sugar in it, but you've combined it with protein and healthy fats, then you are going to slow down the release of sugar from that meal. So you're going to get a more gradual release of sugar and therefore a more gradual release of insulin and a more gradual reduction of sugar. And you are not going to feel those surges and the crashes that inevitably follow. So that's one way of doing it. And then the other way is making sure that you've got enough fiber as well. So again, fiber is complex. So if you've got a meal that has plenty of vegetables or beans and pulses, the fiber will slow down the release of sugar in exactly the same way. So it really boils down to having that really great balanced plate. If you're a healthy balanced plate is good protein, good fats, good fiber, as well as the carbohydrate foods. And you are not going to get those surges and crashes in the same way. And then you're just, again, going to feel good for it.
That's something I've mentioned on the podcast quite a few times. I'm trying to do is look at my plate. I'm like, right, fiber tick, protein tick, healthy fats, carbs. And it's actually not that hard.
No.
Like if you think about it, it could be salmon, which protein plus some fats, a little bit of rice. You got your veggies for fiber. Maybe you want to put a bit of avocado or some olive oil to get some more fats in there. And that's complete.
Exactly.
And actually, if you can start looking at your plate in that way, you can feel much more confident that if you have something sweeter with it,
you're going to be okay.
You're going to be okay. You're not going to get that horrible
even if you have
crash.
a full-on dessert afterwards, you've got all those elements that I've just mentioned in your meal. So everything is going to just slow down and you're not going to feel that craving immediately after your meal. So we've all been there when you have a meal that is not brilliantly balanced and it is high sugar, high carb, without the balancing protein, fats and fiber. Soon after you feel hungry and you just think, well, I've just had a meal, but actually that didn't do very much. And that's simply because you haven't been able to slow down the sugar release in the same way.
I feel like if we really, really could see what our body was doing. So when you say about the pancreas, like doesn't want the blood to turn all gloopy and stuff, it's having to produce insulin. If you, before you were about to reach the cake, could actually see inside your body and what was about to happen if you were eating it, I think a lot of people would actually say, I don't know if I want to do that wear and tear on my body, because it is kind of wear and tear, isn't it? It's like that constant stress. If you're always having processed foods or you're having sugar, you know, quite a bit of sugar that's refined.
It is. And it means your body is working all the time. So your pancreas is releasing insulin all the time. Imagine a scenario where you may have some toast or cereal for breakfast, a sandwich for lunch with a packet of crisps, you know, on a meal deal or something like that. Maybe pizza, pasta for dinner. That's a lot of carbohydrates. You've probably got snacks in between because none of those meals are going to satiate you. So there's probably a lot of grabbing of quick fixes, maybe coffees in between as well. You haven't even come on to alcohol, but, you know, that will also be feeding into that blood sugar cycle. But it means that your pancreas is working all the time. And it goes all the way back to what we talked about at the beginning with the fasting. You've got to give the systems in your body and the organs in your body a rest. There has to be a break. So by eating healthy, balanced meals, you're not going to snack in between. So you're going to have at least 4 or 5 hours in between meals. That's enough for everything to think, okay, good, I can rest. I don't need to keep pumping out insulin. The whole systems in the body can just relax. I can concentrate on repairing, knitting together muscles, knitting together nerves so that your brain health and your nerve health is good. Sleep is another time where all that happens as well, but it is also happening during the daytime. And of course, sleep is impacted by your food choices during the day as well, and the stressors that you present to your body during the day. So you can just see how all the systems in the body are linked, and you can't just take one thing in isolation. And that's something I see a lot in the health space these days. There will be a focus on one food group, on one symptom, on one approach, but you can't do that with your body. You've got to look at your whole body as one entity, and all the systems are linked. And that's how your body works efficiently, when all those systems are in balance and in check. And that's when you know you feel well.
Before we wrap up very, very quickly, because we're running out of time, I'd love to know what are the couple of sort of non-negotiables for you, for your health. I love to just get a little snapshot of the guests and what they do to stay well. Are there any things maybe outside of the sort of obvious nutrition things that you do in your daily sort of routine that help you stay well and energetic?
Yeah, I mean, exercise for me is a big thing. And even more so as I get older. So where I'm still busy, I'm still active, but I do find that's not enough. I actually need to do some form of, in inverted commas, formal exercise. So whether that is going out for a walk, and it's not just a sort of stroll, it's actually a power walk that I am actively going out for, 45 minutes of really active walking. Strength training, I've really started to focus a little bit on that now. So it doesn't even need to be with weights. Don't forget that Pilates and yoga, you use your body weight. So it means you can do it wherever you are. It doesn't matter how busy your life is. But one of the most important things that I've now come to terms with, it does not have to be a full hour's session or 45 minutes. It can literally be 10 minutes. You don't have to get red-faced and sweaty and change even. Sometimes I just do it even in my pajamas. 10 minutes of a little bit of Pilates, some exercises. And I do find that really helps with my mood, and it just boosts my ability to cope with anything. And I think once you've done that, and you can throw anything at you.
Yeah.
And, as well as a healthy diet. And when I say that, for me, it's all about vegetables. I eat everything. There's not anything that I don't eat. But cannot overestimate the number of vegetables that you've got to eat in a day. And by doing that, you're going to get the nutrients in and you're going to feel good. So plenty of vegetables, plenty of exercise, and that's a really good starting point.
Love that. May, thank you so much for coming on the Health Review. I've absolutely loved all of your insights. You've inspired me to come up with some new gut healing recipes and things like that, because I'm still very much on that journey. For people who are interested in following you or coming to one of your retreats, finding out more, where can they find you?
Instagram is probably the best place, May Simpkin Nutrition, or they can sign up for my website, maysimpkin.com. I do send out newsletters, and obviously anything that I'm doing or working on will come through one of those channels. So yeah, I'd love to see you there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, May.
You're welcome. Lovely. Thank you.